Sitting on the park bench, eyeing little girls with bad intent. Hey, Aquila, drying in the cold sun, watching as the pretty Peggy.
Believe it or not, there was once a time in the gaming world where Madden didn't completely dominate the football scene. In the NES days, that title was once occupied by Tecmo when they released Tecmo Bowl in 1988. Based off the arcade game from a year earlier, you can play as one of 12 NFL teams. Although they didn't have the license from the NFL, so there are no official logos or team names. They did get all the teams' appropriate colors and city names, but made up their own logos for the helmets, which you thankfully only see during the game's opening sequence. Tecmo did, however, get the license from the NFL Players Association, so all the player names from the 1989 roster are intact. The player skills are pretty realistic to their counterparts, or about as realistic as 8-bit NES hardware will allow. There's the one-player mode where you pick a team and have to run a gauntlet against the other 11 teams in a row, or a two-player single game. There's another multiplayer option called Coach Mode where you and a friend will just call the plays and the computer will control the players on the field. Speaking of plays, each team has a completely different playbook, all containing 4 plays, usually 2 runs and 2 passes, but a couple teams have 3 passes and 1 run. Each play is a button sequence by pressing one of the 4 directional buttons along with A to select it. How it works is the offense will choose their play and the defense will choose the play they think the offense is going to run. If the defense chooses correctly, then there will be an all-out blitz up the front and the receivers will be blanketed with coverage. In other words, the offense is fucked. Each team has 9 players on the field as opposed to 11 in real life, but it works out just fine. The graphics and animation are crisp, and as a novelty addition for eye candy, there's a halftime show which features a slideshow of cheerleaders in skimpy outfits, a marching band, the American flag, all that good stuff. The controls are fluid as well. Moving your runner is nice and responsive, and while passing you use the A button to toggle your intended receiver and B to pass it. It doesn't take very long to get used to at all. The quarterbacks are very accurate with their passes, which makes the passing game a hell of a lot better than the god-awful attempts by some of the other NES football games. But the problem there is that every single pass is either complete if the receiver is open or intercepted if they're covered by the defense. There's hardly ever an incomplete pass. So since every quarterback really has the same accuracy, it almost makes every quarterback the same in terms of attributes. Joe Montana is just as effective as Jack Trudeau. When the hell was that ever the case? You kick and punt the ball with a power meter where you have to hit the A button at the right time to get enough leg into the kick. It's a pretty fair system. One thing that kind of bugs me is the computer AI. For the most part, its calls make sense as far as down and distance, usually, but they'll sometimes go for it on 4th down in the stupidest situations you can think of. Like 4th and long in their own territory in the first quarter. Get the fuck out of here. I didn't even do that shit when I was 6 years old playing this, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing at the time. The computer won't always make dumb decisions like that, but it gets kind of discouraging when you make a big stop on 3rd down and they go for it when they really shouldn't and then miraculously get it. Pisses me off. But despite these little flaws, Tecmo Bowl was a freaking blast, especially in multiplayer mode. Tecmo would tweak some spots that were rough around the edges with the sequel Tecmo Super Bowl, but we'll get to that one another time. So that concludes this edition of Aqualung's Game Reviews. See you next time.